Hey guys, you're watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and in this video, I want to talk about using your belt as a weapon. Now, I do believe that the belt should be used as a weapon of last resort, and that you should always have other options to use long before that. But it does often get neglected as something that everybody has, or at least everybody should have. And I think that everybody should have a decent belt that could be used for a variety of different things besides just holding your pants up. And in fact, I think it's good to have your pants be able to hold themselves up without a belt and to have the belt just help. But there are some situations in which your belt may be the only thing you have to hand to help you defend yourself or incapacitate a threat. And so I want to talk about some of the things that you could use your belt for if you were in that situation. Now, first, I want to point out some things, and Belgian Prepper definitely touched on a few of these topics in my last video that touched on this topic. It's pretty bad to be reaching for your belt or your belt area if you're in a confrontation where the other person might have a gun or might think that you have a gun. And in fact, in a lot of different situations, a lot of improvised weapons really aren't decent options as many people think that they are. A lot of attacks happen faster and more aggressively than a lot of improvised weapons will allow you to respond to. And in a lot of cases, relying on something like that could end up with you in a worse situation, with them being turned against you, or with you wasting crucial reaction time on a failed response. So it's very, very important to have a very clear eye and to analyze why you think you're going to use an improvised weapon. A lot of improvised weapons are actually thug weapons, and this could actually qualify as one of those, depending on how you're planning to apply it. So, what we're talking about today is using the belt as a weapon. Now, one of the best things about this is the sheer intimidation factor. If you are facing off with somebody, they're probably going to be wondering why you're deciding to take your belt off. And aside from that, nobody wants to be around a grown man who's taking his belt off. Whether that's a memory from childhood or just because, why are you doing that? It's going to throw them off. Now, once you have your belt off, first thing is you have just a little bit of a tool that increases your blocking range. So, or parry essentially. Someone throws a punch at you, rather than just trying to put your hands up in front of it, you have an increased area that you're able to block with. So if you have your hands up like this, that makes it so that they cannot punch between your two hands. And simply by allowing this to move around, you can basically snare up all kinds of attacks. This allows you to block kicks without having to take it directly on your forearms or your side. And it also gives you something to respond with immediately. So let's say that somebody takes a punch at you and you're able to go like this and then immediately swing that around at them. That does give you a little bit of an option beyond just having your hands out in front of you. Now, it is very important that your pants can hold themselves up on their own. And equally important is the fact that things like this can be taken from you. And so, what you need to do is have a planned response for when something like this gets grabbed, what you're going to do immediately while they're grabbing it. So, if I swing this and they grab it, I'm going to be prepared to do something to snare their arm upwards and then kick them in the nuts or something like that, and be ready to completely let it go, and then suddenly use to your advantage the fact that they try to grab this from you and you move in while they're trying to figure out what they're now going to do with it, and you use it to your advantage that one of their hands is now loosely holding something that they thought they were going to wrestle you over, but instead you move in and have your hands around their neck or whatever. So it's very important when using any weapon to know how you're going to react when they try to disable or successfully disable your weapon, and what you're going to do if it's used against you, or if you have the opportunity to use their disabling of your weapon as a brief window of opportunity. Now, I hesitate to mention this as an opportunity to parry a knife because there are a lot of ways that advice in a knife fight can go wrong. But I would rather have something like this myself to try to parry a knife blow and try to maybe keep them at range. But I do want to point out, as is the case in pretty much any of these scenarios, that most dedicated opponents are simply going to brush through something like this or basically plan to take the hit and keep on coming anyways. And so you really can't rely on something like this to keep somebody at range. And that's particularly in a knife fight. It's important to remember that experienced or people who are dedicated to a knife fight are planning on being hurt. And that's important to remember for yourself. If you ever go up against an opponent who is wielding a knife against you, common wisdom says plan on getting cut or stabbed because you almost certainly will. And if you don't plan on it, you will freeze when it happens. So it's just never a good situation if you're fighting somebody with a knife. But I do see something like this as giving you just a little bit of something between you and that knife's edge. If they come at you with a stabbing or a slashing motion, you have something to put out there without having to swing your arm at it and then to whip back at or something like that. Now, again, with the knife, this is mostly an option to keep you away. I would never suggest trying to snare or entrap with somebody who has a bladed edge like that. In all situations with a knife, you probably don't have a reason to go through that person or fight them. So I don't know what you're doing there in the first place. Now, this is just really a decent weapon of opportunity. I don't see you fighting somebody who's trying to mug you with this. I don't see you squaring off with somebody with this. This is you're walking out of church and you don't have a weapon on you. Why didn't you bring a gun to church? I don't know. But you're walking down the street with your wife, all you have is your dress belt on and her purse, and somebody is following you and yelling at you for whatever reason. You have the opportunity in that time to perhaps take your belt off and ready it in your hands. The fact that you have such a prepared response may be enough of an intimidation factor to cause somebody to leave you alone. But if they don't, it's better than having absolutely nothing. Now, as always, it's probably better to have something besides just a weapon of last resort. But if you do find yourself in that situation, or if you're a woman and you find that somebody is suddenly beating the crap out of your husband, it might be pretty decent to have something that you can go up and choke them out with so that they can't just grab your hands and take them off of their neck. So just a few different things to think about. This really, really is a weapon of last resort, and in a lot of different situations, it could wind up being worse than having nothing. So you really need to look at it with a critical eye and ask yourself if it's something that you could use. But I wanted to share it because it is something that all of us have or should have. And so I just wanted to give you a few ideas for what you could use it for and to just give you a little bit of caution if it's something that you have thought of but haven't really critically analyzed for yourself. And I think that that's important with any weapon, whether it's an improvised weapon or a real weapon. You need to ask yourself how you're going to use it and if it's really going to be practical in a situation where you find yourself. Anyways, I hope that was interesting. Let me hear your thoughts, and I'll be sure to follow up on that. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Y'all stay safe out there.